Welcome to the Word of Mouth Podcast, your weekly podcast breaking down the business, trends, and news affecting dentistry today. I'm your host, Jeff, and this is my co host, Sarah.
Hey Jeff, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome. So, last week we talked a little bit about the patient experience in office and how it affects how dental practices are able to grow and develop their practice. This week, we're going to shift focus just a little bit and talk a little bit more about the marketing and new patient acquisition for practices.
Yeah, Jeff, I think dental marketing used to be pretty simple, pretty straightforward, where you run Google Ads, you get listed on directories and maybe send out some mailers to the local community. I think marketing has changed drastically for dentists, and I think a lot of dentists are not keeping up with these changes. They're sticking to what used to work in the past. And I think a lot of dental practices are taking a hit because they're not adapting to these changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of went through a similar thing in the early 2000s. For a long time, dentistry had all been about growing your practice through kind of your local community. Even going back to the original barber surgeons who kind of were dentists as well in the 12th and 13th century, coming all the way through into the 1900s, it was really about getting involved in your local community and becoming kind of the go-to guy for dentistry. Then the yellow pages came out and that became a thing. And then we saw that kind of die off with the rise of digital ads and the accessibility of running Google and Facebook ads. And now we're seeing that die off and we're actually returning back to what was working a little bit more in kind of the late 1800s and early 1900s, more of that community focus because people are so inundated with ads. Not that ads aren't a part of the strategy, but they can't be the whole strategy, which is where I think dentistry and a lot of industries got to over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah, like you said, people are just getting overwhelmed with ads. They're hearing this and that from all sorts of people. And so I think ultimately it comes down to trust. People want to go somewhere they trust. So they'll look into multiple options before making that choice. Whereas I think before it was a little more search dentist near me and kind of go with the first option. Now with AI and even with an emphasis on this more luxury dentistry, I think people are a little more picky with who they choose. And so I think these dental practices need to position themselves in a way that builds that trust and that attracts these people looking at multiple different dental offices.
Yeah, I think the best place to get a new patient is from a referral, and it's because that trust is already built in. If I recommend my dentist to you, you trust me, and that trust is passed to the dentist where they feel like they'll have a good experience because I've had a good experience. I think a lot of that also comes down to the old adage that we're the sum of the five people we spend the most time with. So if dental practices are wanting to acquire more of a certain kind of patient, ask those kinds of patients that are already in your practice because the chances are that the people that they spend time with are people like them. And so if you're wanting to try and clone your best patients, the best way is to ask those patients for people who are like them. And I mean, it's flattering too to hear from a dentist, hey, we love having you come into the practice. Do you know any other people who might be great patients like you? And so a little flattery goes a long way. Don't make it too over the top, of course. But I think that that's a great way for patients to have more trust and why referrals and kind of that local community aspect of dentistry is coming back is people know that you can kind of farm good reviews now and so they're looking for other ways to develop their own educated opinion about a dentist.
And on top of that, Jeff, I mean, getting referrals is the cheapest way to do marketing, in my opinion. Just asking someone is completely free, doesn't take much time. You don't have to pay an outside marketing company to bring these people in. So I think it's cheap, it's simple once you get into the habit of doing it in your dental office, and it's the most effective in getting the patients that you actually want, not just the ones coming in for the routine cleanings. Asking for referrals in the right way is very underutilized across dentistry. And I think these dental practices need to capitalize on this opportunity to build their practice through referrals.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to the Pareto principle where 20% of effort gets 80% of results. And if we look across all of the dental practices that we talk to, people are spending at least 80% of their time, money, and effort on Google Ads, on SEO, on mailers, and they're spending 20% or less on refining ways to attract new patients to their office that do fit their ideal customer profile. We talked a little bit a few episodes ago about how insurance is like the most expensive marketing you could possibly have being part of an insurance plan, because if you're paying every single time that patient comes in, you're paying the insurance $150 to have that, or whatever, to have that patient in your seat, that patient's cost of acquisition just continues to go up, where you get a referral who comes in, and now if they're fee for service, you're or on the in-house plan, it's just gravy. Like, there's no added marketing cost to that outside of maybe a promotion for the patient who referred and a promotion for the patient who's incoming. And even those, I think, have a lot of nuance.
Yeah, Jeff, and you briefly talked about SEO and that kind of online presence for these dental practices. And while it's true that referrals are a fantastic source of these ideal patients, it's important to acknowledge that SEO and online presence are important, but maybe not in the ways that dentists are approaching it. I think the approach has shifted online, and lots of dentists are unaware of how to deal with these shifts. And I think there are a lot of marketing companies that aren't making these shifts as well, that are putting these dentists back when they could be moving forward and getting more of these ideal patients.
Yeah, I think you look at the things that worked, and a lot of it was kind of set it and forget it. Get a good website, maybe run a blog, but a lot of it was kind of get a good website, get your Google business profile optimized, and sail off into the sunset. And now there's a lot more involvement between some of those things, those efforts, but coupling them with efforts, getting involved in local community, doing education events, sponsoring local teams. We've talked in the past about like sponsoring a team and doing mouth guards, and getting the patients to come, or getting the participants in that team, getting the athletes to come into your practice and bring their parents and get to know you, doing more of those things that build trust. I think it used to be that having a website was enough to build trust because there were so many people who didn't have a website. It used to be that having 500 five-star reviews was enough to build trust because most people got a crazy trend that we've seen is that negative reviews are actually having a bigger impact on trust than positive reviews because people are confident that negative reviews are real. And so being able to see how the dentist and the practice reacts to those negative experiences and how they make it right in their response, and those kinds of things are more valuable for the practice than 25 five-star generic kind of reviews. And so a lot of it isn't necessarily doing less of the digital side of things, of ads and website. It's just being more intentional about how you're implementing it and changing the strategic focus of it a little bit, getting more intentional reviews, getting better referrals, having your website identify your involvement in the community and highlight those things. All of that is encompassed in this kind of new age of dental marketing that we're kind of just on the forefront of, and AI is just accelerated.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about asking those ideal patients, those patients you love to see, you love to work with, the ones that are getting the high end services that you want to sell more of, asking them for referrals. I think those are the types of patients you want to ask for reviews, right? They'll write the detailed reviews about why they like your service. Like you said, Jeff, quality of reviews matters. It's very true that if you see a dental practice with a 2-star rating, that's going to draw your attention more, not because you want to go, but because you're curious why their ratings are so bad. You're going to read those negative reviews. Whereas there are lots of dental practices with these 4.9 5-star ratings that's maybe not as attention grabbing anymore, but some of these more detailed reviews can make a big difference for these practices if they are personal, if they feel real, if they're more detailed on the service or the quality of the experience, not just, staff was friendly, just kind of the more generic reviews. It's easy to see through those 100%, but also testimonials, right? Getting these patients that you love working with and filming a quick testimonial, putting that on your website. Like you said, Jeff, it's not doing less of this, it's just doing it more intentionally and building this trust and getting this reputation of being trustworthy. I think requires a little more creativity right now. We've talked a lot about the necessity of creativity in dentistry right now, and I think this is one of those areas where that definitely applies.
Yeah, we went down to one of the practices we work with in Garland, and just in the day that we were there, we got 6 patients who came in and gave a video testimonial, and we'll be rolling those things out on their socials, on their website, in their newsletters, and taking snippets and making a video that they can send out to new patients so that even before the patient comes in, there's an opportunity to continue to build that trust just because they have an opportunity to see the people's faces, to hear their voices. And it's so much more real than just kind of the keyboard warrior on a Google review. Even if it's positive, it feels less genuine because of how we all interact with keyboards and written text on online. And that it probably means just a little bit less than sitting down and or standing up and just taking a video on your iPhone. So they're super easy to capture and most patients are happy to say 1 to 2 sentences about their experience in your practice, but it does require the discipline of remembering to ask and being willing to just be a little bit uncomfortable and have your patients maybe be a little bit uncomfortable. But we talk a lot about this actually, but we talk a lot in our training that's going to be rolling out in our school community coming up about the opportunity for these golden triggers, these moments where patients are already feeling kind of that reciprocity effect in psychology, where you've provided an excellent service. They're looking in the mirror and they say, "Man, my smile looks amazing. Thank you so much." That's a golden trigger moment. You can say, "We're so happy you're pleased with your work. Would you be willing to share so that other people who are in your situation can get the same level of service?" And and people are happy to repay the favor. They feel like you've done them as a great service and you have as a dentist, but taking advantage of that is something that requires discipline and focus, but also it's kind of those non-scalables that take a practice from one step to the next.
Yeah. Jeff, you mentioned social media, getting these testimonials and posting them to your social media. I think social media is a great place for these dentists to build this trust because we're all addicted to the dopamine hits these days. Not all of us are willing to go and scroll through a website and read the reviews or whatever. A lot of people are referring to social media to see, is this practice present online? Do they post these videos? I think if you can get these short testimonials that you mentioned, 1 to 2 sentences, people can just watch those, scroll through them real fast. And that's a very quick way to build this trust and to show a kind of an inside look into your practice and what you prioritize and the way you treat patients and the cleanliness of your office and the services you offer and all that stuff. I think it's just a great platform for these dentists to show, you know, why they stand out, why they're different from other dentists. And it's a fairly easy, another very cheap marketing source that brings in, that has a very cheap way of marketing that has the potential to bring in a lot of the types of patients they're looking for.
Yeah, I think it's also an opportunity to just get your message out. If you can have people engaged with your social media, tell your patients to follow you. That's another thing a practice we work with does is they offer a entry into a drawing for reviews. And we've worked with that practice to add entries for following them on social media. And so the more your patients are on social media, we hear from dentists all the time that they lose a patient, an implant case or a full mouth restoration or some oral surgery that the patient doesn't think that their practice can handle. They think they go to their dentist for just hygiene and preventative care. And then they go somewhere else for some of the more complicated stuff. Meanwhile, that dentist is saying, "Hey, we had a relationship." But if the patient doesn't know you do implants and what that work looks like and those kinds of things, it's hard for them to kind of conceptualize and just guess that you do those things and that you're good at them because their experience with you so far has been more of that routine care. And so the more opportunities you get, like targeted reviews, all of those things are opportunities for you to tell patients, prospective and current, what you do and continue to grow your practice in that way.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking a lot in past episodes about educating your patients. I think that's a great way to culminate this community feel in a very simple and small way for these dentists to really take the time to educate their patients on what they offer. So patients know that if they do need Invisalign, that's offered right there with their dentist. I think that's a great way to build trust, not only on social media, on the website, put that stuff out there, but also in office is a great way to continue to build that trust with patients. And I think if a patient really does feel that trust, does feel that the dentist cares about them and their problems, is willing to talk through them, is willing to educate them, they're more likely to give those referrals. So I think a lot of this community building does happen outwardly, right? The dentist reaching out in the community via social media, sponsorships, all that stuff. But I think it also happens within the office and the culture that they create there as well.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about some things that aren't working anymore. So I would say to start, generic websites is one thing that we just would say it's not working anymore. Saying having a huge wall of text and kind of that keyword stuffing strategy where you're not really capturing your practice's personality. Those are the kinds of things that are not working when it comes to a website.
Yeah, and just kind of the more engaged they can be with the ongoing content and with the posts to their Google business profile, the updates to their SEO, the more effective it's going to be. But unfortunately, a lot of dentists right now are doing the set it and forget it where they aren't making those ongoing changes.
Yeah. And then I think with that, over reliance on digital and insurance for patient acquisition. I think that both of those are very expensive ways to get new patients into your practice now. They may be necessary. I'm not saying that it needs to be eliminated entirely, but from 90% of practices that we talk to, uh, their strategy is effectively just digital ads, so marketing budget there, and then I get insurance patients. And a lot of them are feeling like they want to drop these PPOs, uh, but that over reliance on the PPOs and the insurance patients and digital is certainly not something that's going to work for much longer. And we already see a lot of patients kind of feeling and we already see a lot of dentists feeling that squeeze where they feel like the things that were working aren't anymore, but they don't really know where to go next because it's been kind of an easy set it and forget it, like you said, and that's just not working anymore.
And I think most dentists can acknowledge, and the statistics can acknowledge, that referrals are the best patients because they come in with that trust. And so we've talked about cheaper ways to get these patients in. So absolutely, spending a bunch on paid ads and all that stuff isn't the most effective, and it doesn't get you the best results. With that, I think not having the systems in place to follow up creates a lot of missed opportunities that drops the trust of their patients, and it causes them to miss leads and to lose out on a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, we talked last week, I think, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, about the number one indicator of a practice's success, and that is patient retention. And so, if you're retaining patients, I think a patient that is retained is 5 times cheaper than finding a new one. And so, having follow up sequences, making sure patients are showing up for appointments, but then also just staying in touch, having a holiday email or a kind of promotional email that goes out every once in a while, whatever you want to do, but just making sure that you're in that patient's life regularly via email, text, whatever. Don't be annoying, but twice a year, you definitely have some room in between those times when they're in your office where you can be in touch, educate them about new treatments. If you're adding something like a peptide or like Curodont or AI to your treatment offerings, put those out for your patients so that they're aware. Basically, do a mini press release just for your patients where now they can be aware of those treatment options when they come into the office. And that's again something that builds trust and builds your credibility. And as long as you're not doing it every week, I don't think patients are going to find it super annoying, but it definitely increases the value of your practice.
Yeah, and with some of this outreach, I'm sure it can feel pretty overwhelming to dentists to feel like they need to do all the social media, have these follow up sequences, these email blasts. But the awesome resource that dentists have now that is making this stuff easier than ever is AI. And I think if dentists can take advantage of this AI, it just leads to a faster production of all of this stuff. You can automate these follow up sequences, this outreach. You can create blogs and social media posts and email campaigns. I think while a lot more is required of dentists to have this community engagement and build this trust, I think it's easier than ever to do these things quickly and efficiently.
Yeah, and you want to make sure that it still captures your personality. That's always the balancing act with using AI. But we talked a couple weeks ago about AI in dentistry from a clinical perspective, but also from a marketing perspective. AI is a great resource for dentists and really any business owner to be able to kind of amplify what they're doing. And so, if you have kind of your practice culture, your practice voice, creating content for it isn't a problem with AI. But of course, our recommendation is use AI as kind of the middle step. So come up with the ideas by yourself, use AI to kind of refine it, and then make sure there's a final proof on the back end that you're not sending out weird slop to people. And so, yeah, AI is a phenomenal resource and something that dentists really are probably under leveraging, and they're busy people, and that's why they hire us, is because we're able to help them kind of tackle some of these things. But again, these are the kinds of things that we're hoping will go into our school community, which we hope to be launching soon for listeners of the podcast as well as any other dentists. And we'll just have resources where dentists who are trying to do things themselves or already have someone in house or whatever who are wanting to add some of these things are able to have the resources that we use every day for our clients, but then really amplify those messages in their own practice.
Yeah, Jeff, I think we've noticed as we've been working with dentists and in the services that we offer, we really do focus on creating a clear, repeatable system for these dentists that focus on a few key things. The first being visibility. Patients can't find you if you're not visible. And so it's important that you're out there, that people see you, and that people can find you easily.
Yeah, that's really your SEO and your paid ads, the places where you're really trying to get organic and paid eyeballs on your practice, on your content. And those are really the two ways to do it is through SEO and paid ads. And social media is something that it's possible to get eyeballs on your practice that way. Our approach to social media currently is unless the dentist is committed to filming and posting and leaning into social media and creating that kind of brand persona around the dentist or the practice, social media is maybe more of a place where trust is built, where you're directing people there from your website, from your emails, from your texts. And so it's more of a resource than kind of this visibility tool.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about trust throughout this episode. I think that's really the thing that brings people in and keeps them coming around. Like you said, content on social media is a great way to build this trust. Good reviews that are a little more specific, a little more intentional. And this branding, right? You want to be consistent. Like you said, talking about AI, you want to have a brand to what you're saying, to the message you're delivering. And that ultimately is what creates trust is that consistency throughout.
Yeah, and when you talk about brand, just to be clear, because we live and breathe these kind of marketing terms, when we talk about brand, it is not a logo and colors. It's way more than that. That may be part of it, but it's really the personality or the culture of your practice. Are you more of like a we want to be your friends and family kind of practice, or are you more of a we're all business kind of come in, we'll get you through as fast as possible? Because different kinds of patients like those different cultures or personalities or brands. And so, just to kind of clarify for our listeners who may not be totally clear when we say brand. That's kind of what we're talking about, is what's the kind of vibe of your practice. And that ultimately leads downstream to conversion. So that's in practice best practices, having standard operating procedures for your front desk, for your hygienists, for your dentists, both the practice owner as well as the associates, identifying those golden trigger moments where the patient is having an excellent experience and it's a good time to convert on a treatment plan or ask for a referral or ask for a review or ask for a video testimonial. These kind of golden trigger moments, and they just stack, right? They have one in the chair. It's awesome. They go out to the front desk, have a great experience there. Every single one of those is an opportunity for a practice to continue to develop that patient's value and elevate that patient's experience.
Absolutely. And this conversion just leads to retention. And retention, I would argue, is the most important thing. I think it kind of bunches the rest of these kind of steps or pieces or parts, however you want to say it, into one. If you can cultivate this good experience, if you can nail the visibility, the trust, the conversion, that leads to retention. And having this good communication, the follow-ups, having these in-office memberships like we talked about last week leads to this retention. Having a positive patient experience is ultimately what is going to keep these patients coming back to you, and that's going to provide the most value for your practice, is keeping the same patients coming back.
Yeah. So if we kind of go through it top to bottom, that's kind of get your digital right. Make sure your digital presence, paid ads, website, SEO, Google Business Profile, all of those things are up to date and reflect and capture your practice's brand. The next step moving down is make sure you have a content engine. You're posting on social media, you're getting content out, there's follow ups. Build that patient trust, and that allows you to then convert patients. So increase case acceptance, generate new referrals who already know, like, and trust your practice, generate reviews, and then finally retain those patients. So, building that value and helping patients understand all of the services your practice can provide them. So, Invisalign implants, full mouth restorations, all of these things, in addition to cleanings, whitenings, making sure that the patient knows if they're looking for a service that you provide it, if you do. I mean, of course, developing referral partners is another component of this that we didn't even touch on, but making sure that the patients are coming to you for the services you provide and you want to provide.
And it's important for dentists to understand that speed matters when they are communicating with their patients. We do live in a world of instant gratification, so the faster you can help your patients, the happier they'll be, because that's what they're used to in every other area of their lives. And the happier they are, the longer they'll stay with your practice. And this lifetime value of the patients is often overlooked. I think a lot of new dentists are looking into how they can get new patients rather than focusing on how they can help their current patients stay for life in their practice. And that's ultimately what provides the most value, is keeping these patients around, building that trust, having them come to you for the higher end services you offer, and then giving those referrals. If you have the patients that are coming around forever, for life, you want them bringing in their friends and family to do the same, and that's going to build ultimately a successful dental practice.
Yeah. What it ultimately boils down to, like you said, Sarah, is building trust at scale. It's not about who can spend the most. It may have been in the past, but it's no longer just who can spend the most. DSOs spend more than any independent practice can justifiably spend. They negotiate better rates with PPOs. And so, for independent practices to survive and thrive moving into the future, it's all about creating relationships, showing up consistently, communicating clearly with patients, and then creating the systems that turn new patients and existing patients into loyal, lifelong evangelists for your practice. That is what it ultimately boils down to.
Yeah, Jeff, I think at the end of the day, the best marketing doesn't feel like marketing to these patients. They don't want to feel like they're being sold to. The best marketing feels like and builds this confidence and clarity and trust. And that's ultimately what dentists need to focus on right now if they want to bring in these patients.
100%. And For our listeners, if you enjoyed this podcast, it's on YouTube if you want to see us and come hang out with us kind of in person. It's also anywhere where you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe and come back, hang out with us next week. Check out some of the old episodes. We love to engage with our dentist friends in the comments. So please leave a comment if you have a question or a thought about today's episode, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next one.